more folks join, that's absolutely great. We can get them in, but great to see everybody, even though we're seeing you virtually. Happy homecoming week. This is a homecoming like none of us have ever experienced before, kind of like 2020. So nonetheless, we're excited that you're here this evening. And we just thought this was a great way to kick off our homecoming week here at Pittsburg State. Obviously, there are many things that we will not be able to do this week that we typically do. We won't have a parade on Saturday. We will not have a football game this Saturday. But we are excited to have with us Steve Cox, who's the curator of special collections. He's the archivist for the university, and he's also a professor. And so very excited to have him here with us this evening as well. So primarily tonight's discussion will revolve around the history of Pittsburg State University and a presentation that Steve has put together for us. And then if we have a little bit of time at the end, we'll talk a little bit about some things that we're doing here at the Alumni Association at the university. But it's great to be able to connect with you all, even though it is virtually. You know, typically Danielle, my assistant director, and myself, we would be out on the road going to at least a couple of different places every week. And we have to admit, we really, really miss being out in person, seeing our friends and seeing our alumni. So thanks for hanging in there with us. We hope that you are all doing well, despite the fact that 2020 has been such a crazy year. So without further ado, I'm going to do a screen share and start us off with a video that our campus videographer, Aaron Thompson, put together. And then I will turn it over to Steve Cox, and he will start the formal part of his presentation. So bear with me for just a moment here, friends.
Hello, I'm Steve Cox, curator of the Special Collections and University Archives here at Pittsburg State University. And I oversee a very discrete and unique collection of materials, especially the university archives, a lot of original records and important documents and publications of this university going back to 1903, but also a large collection of local history. And two of the main topics of local history is the mining history of this region from the early 1900s and the socialist history that took place here in southeast Kansas and other places of Kansas in the early 1900s, at least about the first half of the 20th century. So our collections are heavily focused on those two items in addition to the university archives. If you can see over my shoulder, that's a portrait of a man named Jean de Gruson. And Jean de Gruson was the original curator of the Special Collections and University Archives here at Pitt State. And he started it in the late 1960s. He was originally an English professor here and was literally heading out the door to accept a teaching position at the University of Georgia when they asked him to stay and start a Kansas collection here in the library. And he did, and he kept that position for 30 years and built up a lot of collections focusing on the mining and the socialist history here. And that lasted until his unexpected death in the late 1990s. The earliest collection of socialist material that we have here at Pittsburg State University is the collection of Julius A. Wayland, a newspaper editor that moved to Girard in the late 1800s and built up probably the world's largest political newspaper, a socialist newspaper called the Appeal to Reason. And one of his main contributions was promoting the socialist agenda and message. One thing that came from this collection is this book here, The Jungle, an American classic by Upton Sinclair. And in 1904, Wayland wanted to get in on the new style of journalism called muckraking journalism, so he hired an unknown author named Upton Sinclair, a young man about 25 years old, to go up to Chicago and write the Uncle Tom's Cabin of the Wage Slave. And Sinclair went up there and wrote this book, at least did the research to write this book. And the book was originally published in Wayland's newspaper in Girard, The Appeal to Reason, and then the next year was published in book form. When Wayland died in 1912, the company was taken over by Emmanuel Haldeman Julius. You can see a portrait of him. And he turned the Appeal to Reason press into his own publishing dynasty through the little blue books and other newspapers and publications. And between 1919 and his death in 1951, they estimate that he printed and sold over 500 million little blue books on a variety of subjects. We have a large collection of material related to Haldeman Julius and his publishing press in Girard. We also have a large collection of photographs related to the history of this university, and some of the more intriguing photographs are those of the fire that took place in Russ Hall in 1914 and nearly burned the building down to the ground. We're currently devising an exhibit featuring the artwork of a Pittsburg State University alumnus and a nationally known sports artist named Ted Watts. Ted was commissioned by a lot of universities and sport teams across the United States to do game day program covers and original art, posters for the schedules, and we have a large collection of those materials here. There should be a digital exhibit up in the digital commons of the library that anybody can see, and we intend by the end of October to have an on-site visit here in the special collections of some of Ted's artwork. Hello, I'm Steve Cox, curator of the special collection.
All right, so let me okay. Steve, can you see me again?
Yes, I can see you.
Okay, all right, excellent, excellent. Well, so that was something to whet your appetite for what Steve is going to talk about, and to talk about, you know, it would be impossible for him to talk about everything this evening that
I think
our
this is
university
backed up. Oh, maybe it
archives
is.
have. So let's see here. Let me make sure that everybody gets muted here. Okay, I think we're taken care of there. So Steve, I will go ahead and turn it over to you if that sounds all right.
Okay.
I know you need to do a screen share, so feel free to.
Let me pull that up. Appreciate everybody coming out tonight, tuning in to see this little presentation. The little film that you saw was just something we did just kind of promote the special collections and to show that in addition to university history, we have a lot of the local history as well. Let me pull this up here.
And Steve, let me interrupt you just real quickly. If anyone has questions throughout the evening, there's a chat function at the bottom here. If you hover your cursor down at the bottom, you can see the chat function. Feel free to type any questions you might have into that. And then when Steve is done with his presentation, we'll present those questions to him and hopefully get them answered.
Okay, let me get the share screen up here.
All right.
A little slow. Here we go. All right. I hope everybody can see that. I got a couple of dozen slides to show you from photographs that we have within the university archives. And I always like to start when I'm talking about university history with a little bit of just background history on Pittsburgh itself. Let me see if I can advance that. Hold on. There we go. And some of you may know this, some of you may not, but the city of Pittsburgh was established in 1876 and finally incorporated in 1879. But you might not have known that briefly we were known as Iowa City because the original residents immigrated here, or didn't immigrate, but traveled here from Iowa. So for a brief period, we were Iowa City, and some of the oldest maps that you can see that have us on there will have us as Iowa City. And we were named after Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Originally, we were known as the New Pittsburgh with the H. And I believe right now in the United States, there are 12 different Pittsburghs. And I do believe we're the second biggest of all of them. but we were originally known for the zinc and lead mining and attracting miners and laborers from Southern and Eastern Europe. And for that reason, we got the nickname of the Little Balkans. And this is just a picture we have in the archives of some of the early miners that we had here. You know, it was hard, dirty work, and you can tell it reflects that from the condition that they're in. The school probably wouldn't be here without Ebenezer Porter, a state senator from Crawford County, who was really instrumental in getting the funds together to get this school established. On February 11th, 1903, the Senate Bill number 234 was passed, and that was an act to establish in Pittsburgh an auxiliary manual training normal school to be under control and direction of the Board of Regents of the State Normal School in Emporia. So they're talking about what is now Emporia State University. And we were established as a normal school, which was an old phrase for a teacher's college. However, the people in Emporia State weren't that happy to have us be part of them. And their president issued the statement, "The Pittsburgh School is a foundling laid at the door of Emporia, an unwelcome child that the state compels us to father." And I think that kind of gave us a chip on our shoulder for the first 10 or so years. And I know that the original leaders of the university really fought hard to get us separated from Emporia State to be our own college. But we've had 5 names over the years. We started out as the Kansas State Manual Training Normal School Auxiliary, which is a mouthful. And it's funny because over from publications over the first 10 years, that word auxiliary seems to travel and gets planted in various places in that sentence. In 1913, we got to drop the auxiliary because we became independent of Emporia State, but we were still a Kansas State Manual Training Normal School, and so on. And I'll get more back into that about the name changes later on. Our first leader of the college was a man named Russell S. Russ, and that is who Russ Hall is named for. He was not a president, he was the principal of the school, like a high school or a junior high school. And he led the university for 8 years, from 1903 to 1911. A side note, Dr. Russ lived to be 102 years old and lived till 1962. He was born in 1860 and lived at the ripe old age of 102. But in 1911, he was pretty much fired from the school because he was a little bit too vocal in trying to get us separated from Emporia State. Our first building was not here on the campus today. It was downtown on 5th and Walnut Street. It was the Central School Building. And for the first 5 years of our existence, we were in this old school building down on the corner of 5th and Walnut. Russ Hall had not been built yet. What I find interesting is the basic requirement for acceptance for a student to enroll at the college here. They only had to have an 8th grade average, 8th grade education with an average of at least 80% or a B. They had to have some satisfactory character references. Those already with teaching certificates, and apparently you didn't have to have a college degree to get a teaching certificate, but if you had a teaching certificate, you were accepted for advanced courses. And those already accepted to the State University in Lawrence would be accepted into the second year of the curriculum here. This is a good picture of one of the first graduation classes the following year. We started in 1903. This is the graduating class in 1904, all women. And I got Sarah Prestwick Chandler, third from the left, kind of singled out. I'll talk a little bit about her in a minute. She, in addition to being one of the earliest graduates, was also on the faculty here afterwards. Oh, there she is. She was the first student to enroll in 1903, and she was hired upon graduation to teach at the college as the first director of the domestic arts program. When we started out in 1903, we were a teacher's college that emphasized the domestic and industrial arts. And I just wanted to pull a few pictures out from the early years of some of the classes. and laboratories that we had. This was the metal shop. You can see them working on anvils. There's a woodworking class. These are undated photos, but I believe they're from the first 10 years. And even domestic arts, sewing. They got even sewing machines there. We even had an orchestra, 1906, an orchestra, and it's not what we would think of today as an orchestra. This is more of a musical ensemble, but I do see a couple of guitars, a violin, looks like a mandolin, ukuleles, a couple of horns. So we did have a little bit of culture back in those early days. 1907, we had an event up in Topeka where Dr. Russ and Senator Porter went up to the state legislature to try to lobby for more money to build a new building for the campus. And we did receive that, but because they actually ended up down on the floor where they weren't supposed to be, they were fined a bushel of apples. But we got the money for the building. So ever since then, we've celebrated in the spring Apple Day, which it's not our commencement day or anything, but it's a day that really shows that we were allowed and got the funding to start moving forward and growing. And we've celebrated it every year since. That money gave us the funds to build Russ Hall. And we began construction in 1907. And here's a picture from the archives of the workers that are working on Russ Hall. It's not nearly complete. I don't know if you can see, there are actually workers on the roof as well. And the original marble staircase in Russ Hall. When Dr. Russ was let go, we had for just 2 years George Edmund Myers as the second principal of the university. He probably, even to this day, has the shortest tenure of any of the principals or presidents that this university has had. It only lasted 2 years. But under his leadership, we began awarding 4-year degrees. But he too lost his job over the separation issue of us being separated from Emporia State, which actually happened in 1913. They separated us and they let him go. So he kind of won, but lost in the end. But that also prompted some new building on campus. The Industrial Arts Building, today's Whiteside Hall, was built in 1913 and rededicated as Whiteside Hall in 1964. And in 1913, the Kansas State Manual Training Normal School Auxiliary, and there's that mouthful again, is officially separated from the Kansas State Normal School in Emporia. Auxiliary is dropped from the name, and the school's name becomes the Kansas State Manual Training Normal School, or SMTN for short. And it was about that time they started issuing a Bachelor's of Arts degrees. Our first true president was William A. Brandenburg. He was hired right after Dr. Meyer. He came into 1913 and served for 27 years. He passed away unexpectedly in 1940. The year after he started, tragedy hit the campus when Russ Hall caught fire during a storm. And we have a handful of photographs that show the damage that Russ Hall suffered. And you could tell by looking at it, it was massive. And it came very close to burning to the ground. Matter of fact, it just looks like the shell, the facade is left. There's no roof. You can look through the windows and see sky. It's another picture. And how they were able to save the structure, I don't know, but apparently they did, and immediately began working towards replacing it, restoring it. The school was not held up. We continued classes on the lawn in front of or behind Russ Hall. And the library books, this is a good picture we have in the archives. The library books were saved. The library was on, I believe, the second floor of Russ Hall at the time. And students formed a human chain to kind of start passing the books out the window. And most of them were saved. And you can see they set up tents there in front of Whiteside Hall to hold some of the classes. This was in the summer. This was at the end of June, so this was probably in July and August. It may have been a little warm, but we were able to continue our classes and had some classes in buildings downtown. The town of Pittsburgh immediately raised funds to start fixing up Russ Hall, restoring it, and some of the buildings downtown offered classroom space as well. From 1917 to 1918, World War I years, many students and several faculty were represented in batteries C and D of the 130th Field Artillery of the Kansas Army National Guard. And at the time, they established Camp Brandenburg on campus for training. Immediately following the war, the Spanish flu hit. This was our earliest pandemic. And when we started seeing the signs of it on campus and statewide, nationwide, back in the spring, people began asking me, well, find out what the university did for the Spanish flu. And oddly enough, I've looked in the archives and nobody really saved anything about how this university handled the Spanish flu. I believe they did wear masks, and I don't know about the social distancing, but unfortunately I couldn't find any pictures or any information really in the archives about that. The yearbooks don't really reflect it. So it's kind of a mystery, and for that reason we are saving items and began saving them in March about how this campus is dealing with the coronavirus today. And so hopefully in the future, when researchers and historians want to see our experience with the COVID-19 coronavirus, there'll be plenty of information for them to see how this university dealt with it, how they coped, and how we hopefully will be getting through it. From 1919 to 1929, we have our first significant era of building. We add a lot more buildings to the campus. We expand the space. We are now on the current spot. When we built Russ Hall in 1907, we left the downtown school building on 5th and Walnut and moved here onto Broadway. This is really the first image of a gorilla that this university adopted to use once we became the Pittsburg State, or the gorillas. Speaking of which, talk a little bit about the gorillas, because I'm asked quite a few times, how long have we been the gorillas? How did that come about? And it was a nickname that was adopted by our student body in 1920 to promote school spirit. And it originally meant just a roughneck, a rowdy person. There was a group of students that would meet at the sporting events and just really raise the roof and sit right behind the visiting team and just really yell at them and try to intimidate them. So that was sort of what the gorilla meant, but it was officially adopted in 1925 as the school mascot, and naturally they had to go with the gorilla image. And today, as I understand, it's the only college or university in this country that has a gorilla mascot. I mean, there's tons of lions and bulldogs and bears, but only one gorilla, so we're kind of proud of that. In 1919, we got a major building on campus, Carney Hall, which was very similar looking to Russ Hall, and it was on the opposite end of the oval. And it was unfortunately torn down in 1980. It had a nice auditorium, not a huge auditorium, but a nice auditorium, and a lot of performances and visiting entertainers came through. Chandler Hall was built next, that in 1922, and it lasted for 80 years. Willard Hall was the first student residence hall that was built on campus, opened in 1923. And most of our buildings on campus are named after former presidents, former professors, and Willard Hall is one of two buildings on campus that are named after somebody that really had nothing to do with Pittsburg State University or even Kansas. Willard Hall was named after Frances Willard, a woman temperance leader from the East Coast, who in the early 1900s was honored a lot of times by having a lot of buildings and schools named after her. The football stadium, you can see down there Brandenburg Stadium, as it was called when it was built after President Brandenburg, was being built in 1923. You see Carney Hall immediately to the left of it, but Brandenburg Stadium is under construction there. The bleachers are. I believe all the male faculty were required to chip in several hours a day and assist in some of the minor parts of the construction. And it was said to be the first concrete stadium in the country constructed on the campus of a teacher's college. And it may be, I saw somewhere that they think it may be one of the oldest stadiums in the country still being used. It was opened on November 11th, 1924, and this is a picture. The football team played Friends University and won 12-2. We have quite a few pictures of the early football games in the archives. I always find them interesting to look at because the leather face maskless helmets, but you see they did have shoulder pads then. Had cheerleaders and yell leaders, both female and males. Other sports, here's a track and field team from 1921. I see the M probably for annual, I guess. The T's on the jerseys, track maybe, I'm not sure. Basketball. And that top row, second from the left, John Lance, the longtime, very successful basketball coach. Here's a class picture from 1922. And the reason I wanted to include it is because I guess since 1922, Pittsburg State University has always had a strong international student program. And these, we believe, are the first two international students there at the bottom right hand, two Chinese students at the bottom right, first row, that were enrolled here in 1922. In 1927, the university built and opened Porter Library, named after Ebenezer Porter. And this, I believe, was the third, maybe fourth location for the library. At the time, it had moved from the central school building to Russ Hall, one other location, I think. And then in 1927, the library got its own building. So this is a good picture of Porter Library in 1927. As today, it's Porter Hall. It houses the art department. And Horace Mann, the teacher training elementary school, was opened in 1927, a laboratory school that allowed some of our education majors to get hands-on experience in teaching. Other buildings popped up. Mechanical Arts Building in 1928, today's Hartman Hall. And McCrae Hall in 1929, named after Walter McCrae, a longtime music professor and head of the music department here for many decades. And he passed away in 1959 and 1961. Faculty voted to name the building in honor of him. So we entered the Depression years, 1929 to 1941, that were immediately followed by the World War II years. Enrollment declined during the Depression in the 1930s. We averaged about 3,900 students, and it's not surprising that there would be a decline in enrollment. When the U.S. entered the war in 1941, enrollment still continued to decline, especially in male students, as a lot of them were enlisting and going overseas to fight. The school offered a Navy college training program called the Navy V-12 program, which was an officer training school. And if it weren't for these students who came here for that, we probably wouldn't have been able to field a football team because we wouldn't have had enough males on athletes on campus. But because of the soldiers and the officers in training, that gave us enough students we needed to have a football team. And this is one of the next kind of image logo of the Kansas State Gorilla. From 1951 to 1966, it was sort of a second era of buildings that focused on classrooms and student services. College High School, built in 1951, today's Gladys Kels Hall, which houses the School of Business. So we had an elementary school and a high school here on campus for our education majors. The Student Center, today's Overman Hall, Overman Student Center, was completed in 1950, and Jack Overman was head of that for many decades. And that's a good picture of it there after its completion. Picture, I think, dates to about 1955. Our president at the time was Reese Hughes. He followed Dr. Brandenburg after his death in 1940, and it was during his time here that we had our 50th anniversary in 1953, and we have some pictures of that ceremony. I don't know if you can tell from the cake. I believe there is a Russ Hall building on top of the cake. That's a big cake. And Reese Hughes Hall, today's Hughes Hall, was built in 1962 in honor of Dr. Hughes. We saw a lot of student housing pop up in the 50s. You had Bowen Hall, Trout Hall, Tanner Hall, and Shirk Halls, all within about a 3-year period. Yates Hall, named after James A. Yates, a physical science professor, in 1963. And Odella Nation Hall, she was a librarian in 1962. Odella Nation was one of the original faculty members on the campus and was the last one to retire, I believe, in the 40s. And earlier, when I showed you the picture from the Russ Hall fire of all the library books that had been saved, it was under her direction that she organized a student chain and a ladder to bring the books out. Dellinger Hall, under construction in 1965, named after biology professor Oris Dellinger. And we continue to see steady growth from 1966 to 1984, including our final name change during that period as well. Timmons Chapel was built in 1966. Wilkinson Alumni Center, where John is right now, was built in 1976. And John, I'll let you jump in for a second. Who were the Wilkinsons?
Steve, you were asking who were the Wilkinsons?
Yes.
They were individuals who had a great deal of affection for the university, and felt that we a school like this needed an alumni center that fit the rest of it. So we are here we are 40 years later, or 44 years later, and we're still incredibly grateful to be in this beautiful facility.
Right, and it is. I'm sure a lot of you have already been in there, but it kind of brings me to a point I wanted to mention, is that it was a long tradition for universities and colleges to name buildings after former administrators and professors. And about 20, maybe 30 years ago, schools began to realize they were missing up on a good fundraising opportunity by allowing donors to have a building named after them. And I'm not sure if the Wilkinsons were major donors, but you're starting. They were, and you start to see that now today, where buildings, not just here, but colleges across the country are beginning to be named after donors, and we recognize administrators and faculty in other ways through scholarships, endowed chairs, and memorials on campus. McPherson Hall, today's Bradley School of Nursing, came not too long after that, 1977. And then on April 21st, 1977, at that time we were the Kansas State College of Pittsburgh. We officially became known as Pittsburg State University by an act of the Kansas legislature in the spring of 1977. On the same day, Emporia State University and Fort Hays State University also became got university status. They were also colleges at the time. So on that day, the 3 state colleges all became were awarded university status. The first building on campus after we became Pittsburg State University was the building I'm in right now, the Leonard Axe Library, which was opened in 1979, named after President Leonard Axe, who was president here from the late 50s until the mid 60s. And this picture is the grand opening. You see Governor John Carlin on the left with Pittsburg State University President James Appleberry on the right with the ceremonial key to the library. More buildings followed. Heckard Wells Hall in 1984, which stands where Kearney Hall stood and was torn down in 1980, named after 2 professors, Leon Clayton Heckard of the chemistry department and James Ralph Wells, who had taught in biology. The Baxter Broadcast Center in Shirk Hall was opened in 1988, named after Francis Baxter. And some sports arenas. The Kearney Smith Stadium. Brandenburg Stadium was renamed to Kearney Smith Stadium in 1989, and I don't see why not. He brought us our first 2 national championships in football. But Prentice Gudgeon Track in 1989, after the longtime track coach, Gene Bicknell, who has given a lot to not just Pittsburg State University, but to Pittsburgh in general, has a sports complex named after him in 1995. And we'll see in a little bit, he wasn't done yet giving to this university. And the Al Ortolani baseball field, named in 1995 after the longtime coach here as well. The Kansas Technology Center was opened in 1997. The 4 wings were named after Bill Graves, Joan Finney, Bob Dole, and Gene Bicknell. In 1986, we adopted the image of the gorilla that is still in use today, the split-faced gorilla. Just a really unique and eye-catching logo for this university. Talk a little bit about the coaches here, the 3 main coaches. Kearney Smith, I mentioned earlier, longtime football coach. Garfield Doc Weed, they always called him Doc Weed, and it turns out he really was a doctor. He was a dentist. I don't believe he practiced much, but he was a true dentist. And John Lance, the longtime basketball coach here. We've had 4 national championships in football, 1957, 61, 1991, and 2011. And I see a good trend here. Seems like we do well in years that end in 1. So I'm hoping next year we got our football season back and get things going. Got a new coach this year, so anything's possible. And we just haven't been successful in football. 4 years ago, the women's track and field won the national championship in Division II. And 2 years later, the men's track and field won the national championship. We had our centennial in 2003, had a big event. You see I was going to point to it, but you wouldn't see me pointing. President Tom Bryant there helping the ladies cut the cake, one of the cakes. We added the Veterans Memorial in 2004, the Tyler Research Center in the fall of 2007. Same year as the Student Recreation Center. The Bryant Student Health Center in 2009, named after President Tom Bryant, who stepped down that year. The Crossland House in 2012, today where our President Steve Scott lives. And the Bicknell Performing Arts Center 5 years ago, 2015, a beautiful, beautiful performing arts center. If you haven't been in there yet, next time you're on campus, you need to tour it. It is very nice. We've had a lot of top-notch Broadway productions come through there, a lot of musical groups and performers that come through there. And we've also housed some pretty important speakers. One of the first speakers they had was, she was then former First Lady Laura Bush. President Bill Clinton spoke later that year. Mitt Romney 2 years later, and then last year Condoleezza Rice. So we're always looking at bringing in key speakers, especially political figures. The Plaster Center was opened in 2015, a state-of-the-art athletic training facility. Just talk a little bit about the presidents of the university. We had the first two principals, Russ and Meyer, but then with the presidents, just in review, you had William Brandenburg. He brought us national accreditation, helped rebuild Russ Hall. He envisioned an architectural plan for the Oval and really helped with the faculty development. He was followed by Reese Hughes, who served here for 16 years up until 1957. Brought us national prominence in teacher education. He added 40 acres to the campus and also served 6 terms as a state representative. He was followed by Leonard H. Axe from 57 to 1965. The library is named after him. Under his leadership, we became the Kansas State College of Pittsburgh. I believe with Kansas State Teachers College before that. Slight name change. He oversaw the 3rd extensive building program on campus and saw enrollment nearly double, from 2,700 to 4,600 during his time here, and saw and was able to get a significant increase in faculty salaries. He was followed by George F. Budd from 1965 to 1977, who oversaw an academic and administrative reorganization and just saw a lot of buildings and renovation buildings. It was he that really started requesting university status for the campus, which meant more funding from the state and a little bit more prestige as well, and graduate degrees awarded as well. James Appleberry followed him for 6 years, and it was under his presidency that we got university status and saw our 75th anniversary. He expanded the alumni chapters and saw several important buildings built on campus. He raised faculty salaries and helped with promotion and tenure. Donald Wilson served for 12 years, 1983 to 1995. Saw some strategic planning on campus, developed the Honors College, and had our athletics teams move from NAIA to NCAA, a big leap. And it was he that sort of proposed the Kansas Technology Center. And John Darling, for 3 years after him, the Guerrilla Village and Guerrilla Fest was established. He had the presidential emerging leaders and oversaw the renovations of Horace Mann, Willard, and Russ Hall. Tom Bryant served for 10 years. Under his presidency, we saw the campaign for Pittsburg State. We saw enrollment records and numbers. He oversaw the centennial celebration, and the student health and recreation centers were established under him. And today we're governed by President Steve Scott. He's been here for, 11 years now. Saw the addition of a Doctor of Nursing practice, which was the first doctoral program in university history, and the addition of the region's first undergraduate polymer chemistry degree, just to name some things that he's accomplished and still accomplishing. There'll be many more. I want to close talking a little bit about the senior gifts, one of the main traditions on campus, and something that a lot of you may have had a hand in. A lot of the senior gifts that were given to the university prior to 1914, unfortunately, were lost in the Russ Hall fire that year, including this statue of Nike, which was a gift to the class of 1906. We got a lot of grandfather clocks that graduating classes have given the university, and you can still see them in a variety of places across campus. And I believe a handful of them are here in the library. Today, you still see this little plaque which says Brandenburg Field, and you see to the right and left of it a bas-relief of 2 athletes, which was a class gift of class of 1924, and the artist was the alumnus Waylon DeSantis Gregory, who went on to be a famous artist. You see benches across campus. as senior gifts. Seals. This one was done in 1964 when we were the Kansas State College of Pittsburgh. This gorilla, which sits out in front of the Overman Student Center, was designed by art professor Larry Wooster and was a gift of the class of 1965. And more recently, 3 classes got together and contributed the Centennial Bell Tower, which is just south of the library, stands today. So I just want to take a look at the 5 names that we've been over the years. And I believe now we've been Pittsburg State University the longest, but we started off with that tongue twister, mouthful, Kansas State Manual Training Normal School Auxiliary, and we just kind of started whittling it down, and now it's just down to 3 words, Pittsburg State University. So that's just a brief history of this university, and hope you enjoyed it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Thank you so much, Steve. If we were in person, I would say everybody who learned something new tonight, raise your hand. And I would guess that everybody would raise their hand. I've been at the university in one form or another for about 25 years now, and I definitely learned some facts tonight. So thank you, Steve.
Sure.
Didn't get any questions via chat, but if anyone would like to ask Steve a question, you could unmute yourself, and you could certainly do so at this point.
Hey, Steve, this is Roger Cycling from
Yes.
the class of 1993.
Sure.
Thank you for the presentation. It was really well done.
Welcome.
The original building that you mentioned that was downtown, was that a building that was built for the Teachers College, or was that already an existing building in 1903?
No, it was an old school building. I don't even know how old it was, but no, we moved into a school building that probably was the original high school, but they had already built a bigger one on Broadway. So I think it was a convenient, empty schoolhouse at the time.
And is that building, does it still exist?
I don't believe it does, no. I'm not sure when it was taken down.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Steve?
Yes, I have a question. This is Glenn Davey, class of 1973,
Hi, Glenn.
out of Chicago area.
Okay.
I don't know if I missed it, but I had a lot of classes in Whitesett or Whitsett Hall. Who was the individual that building was named after?
He was a professor here. He and his father, I believe, both taught here, but the first name escapes me, but he was a former professor here who went back to the early days, and he taught in the industrial arts in sort of the printing area.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions?
Yeah. Hi,
Yes.
I'm Buffy Hollis, class of 1989.
Hi,
I'm
Buffy.
in Texas now. Hi. I just wanted, we were co-ed from the beginning.
Yes. Oh, yes.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to double check.
Oh, yes, we were. And not all the universities were, but we were. It may have just been kind of coincidental that it looked like it was all women. I'm not sure it was all women to begin with, but the first graduating class was all female.
Any other questions?
Glenn, if I can go back just a second, 2 years, I just looked it up real quick. Andrew Harmon Whitesett is who Whitesett Hall was named after. And he began teaching here in 1908 in the industrial arts program.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? You know, we've got folks online tonight from Virginia, from the Chicago area, from Brazil. So really all over the country and all over the world. And you know, I think that's something that's important to think about too, I think that's certainly part of what has made the, the history of Pittsburg State so rich, is that we've had people from all over the world attend this school. And that has certainly, I think, added to the learning experience of everyone who has been able to go to school here. So just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, unfortunately, our international program is suffering quite a bit because of the COVID-19. I believe we only had a couple of international students, but I know we have well over 100 normally, I believe, John. Is that right?
Yes, yes. I mean, you know, years ago it was in the hundreds, and yeah, you know, due to many reasons, those numbers are down. But you know, that is something that's important to this university, and it ebbs and flows. And so I have no doubt that, you know, in the years to come, we'll see those numbers come back up again. Obviously, with what's going on with the virus in the world, it's a really challenging year for anybody.
And I know those students, I've interacted with a lot of international students in the years I've been here, and they just love it here. And they go back home to their countries with Pittsburg State t-shirts and clothing. And I think they're one of our best ambassadors that we have.
Absolutely. Other questions? We're seeing some neat little things pop up on the chat about folks who got married at Timmons Chapel, and you know, just people all over the country here. Alabama tonight.
And I do see somebody asked about Grubbs Hall, and I did leave that out. Named after Ora Frances Grubbs, who was a professor here. Let me see, 1914. Started here in 1914 in history. But yeah, Grubbs Hall. And
Ed May, who asked about that, she spent a lot of time in Grubbs Hall, as did I, as a communication major back in the day. Absolutely.
I appreciate everybody's comments.
Yes, thank you again, Steve. A virtual round of applause for you. So thanks for your time. Friends, while we have a captive audience, I just have a few things that I want to share with you. I won't keep you much longer because we've built this to be an hour long, and Steve, you were right on time. You left us a perfect amount of time, so thank you. But I did want to point out, you know, this is homecoming week here at Pittsburg State, and it's a unique homecoming week, and obviously we're not able to do all the things that we typically would like to do, but we are planning a virtual homecoming convocation that will be broadcast live on pittstate.tv on Friday at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. And so we will hear from President Scott. I am actually emceeing that event, so you'll hear a little bit from me. But really, we're going to have a pep rally. It's pre-recorded, so we have our social distancing done properly. And we will also announce our homecoming court, our homecoming royalty. So if we hope that maybe you will tune in for that at 11 o'clock, as I said, Central Standard Time, pittstate.tv. And all these things that I'm talking about and more, we will send this out to you in an email tomorrow with some of these links and some of these details, so you don't need to jot it down. But that is going on Friday. On Saturday, in lieu of a football game, we will be broadcasting highlights from the 1991 and the 2011 season, two of our more recent championship seasons. So at 1 o'clock, we'll have highlights from the 1991 football season. And of course, we won the national championship that year. And then at 2 o'clock, we will have highlights from the 2011 national championship season. So if you're looking for something fun to do on Saturday afternoon, maybe you would have planned to be here watching football, as I would have, you can tune in once again to pittstate.tv and check out highlights from those 2 years. So we certainly hope you'll do that as well. Graduation, we just want to let you know that we will have a commencement a little bit early this year because once our students leave for Thanksgiving, they will wrap up the semester online. We figure they're going to be going home. We don't necessarily want them to come back and maybe bring something they picked up back at home back to campus. So we will have our graduations are held on Friday, November the 20th, We have College of Technology at 2 p.m., Kells College of Business at 4 p.m., College of Education at 5:30, and the College of Arts and Sciences at 7 p.m. And then the following day, on the 21st, that Saturday, at 9 a.m., we will have commencement for fall 2020 graduate degree candidates. And then at 10:30, we will have the College of Arts and Sciences and the College of Business from the spring. So those are the individuals who missed graduation in the spring. That'll be at 10:30 that Saturday morning. And at noon that Saturday morning, we will have the College of Education and the College of Technology. And I am actually announcing all of those graduations. So I might be a little hoarse in the voice by the end of that weekend, but we are excited to be able to give these students the experience that we know they deserve. And it will be modified, but they will actually be able to be there in person and receive their diplomas. And that's a big deal to us.
John, you got a question? You got a question there?
Oh, yes.
You see it?
Let me see here. Will the football highlights be available to watch later than Saturday? That's a good question, Brad. Yeah, we will put them out there after those live viewings so people will be able to watch them later as well. They'll be archived. So excellent question. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is, if you haven't heard, we are actually going to have 5 football games this season. They're not all with MIAA schools, but I know our athletics director, Jim Johnson, has worked very hard to make this happen along with other individuals. And so we will have 2 home games. We'll have one on October the 31st, and we'll have another one on November the 21st. And tickets went on sale today for 2019 and 2020 season ticket holders, as well as Endowment for Excellence members. PSU student tickets may be picked up starting this week, and then remaining tickets are available to the general public beginning on Wednesday the 14th. No game day ticket sales. So if you're interested in coming to one of those 2 football games we're having on campus, obviously limited numbers. I'm not sure how many people are going to allow in the stadium, but I've heard around 25% capacity tossed around. So keep that in mind as well. Certainly if you have more questions, you can reach out to us and we're happy to help you out. The last thing before everybody gets offline is, believe it or not, we have some stuff to give away. And what we're going to do is we're going to mail it out to you. So I drew some names out of the hat while Steve was presenting. And so we have your contact information, and we will get this in the mail to you. So our first lucky winner tonight is Beth Brandell. Beth Brandell, you're getting a couple of Once a Gorilla, Always a Gorilla koozies. So Beth, congratulations. I'm going to jot down exactly what you won for my records. All right, next we have Randy Cook. Randy is tuning in from Norfolk, Virginia this evening. And Randy, we've got a Pitt State Cup for you here. So we will get that in the mail. So congratulations, Randy. Okay. Glenn Davey. Glenn Davey is from Illinois. Thanks for tuning in tonight, Glenn. We have some Pitt State coasters for you here. So we will get those in the mail. Congratulations to you. Our next winner is Thomas Davis. Thomas Davis. We've got a Pitt State mug for you, Thomas. So congratulations on that. We've got some Pitt State sunglasses that we're going to drop in the mail here. And those are going all the way to Alexandria, Virginia. Catherine Vollen. Catherine Vollen, we've got some sunglasses for you. So congratulations. And then last but not least, going to Carol Kazimierski in Minneapolis. Carol, I lived in Northfield, Minnesota for years. Beautiful up there. We've got a Pitt State Alumni and Constituent Relations bag that we will put in the mail for you. So congratulations to you as well. So Everyone, thank you for tuning in this evening. Once again, special thanks to Steve Cox for his time. He does many great presentations for our office, for our half-century reunion that we have nearly every year. We weren't able to have it last year. We're keeping our fingers crossed on this year, but Steve does great things, and he's very passionate about his work. So thank you again, Steve. Everyone, you can expect an email tomorrow highlighting some of these things I talked about, as well as some of the different things that are available to you through the Alumni Association here at Pittsburg State. Please know that we miss seeing you, and we certainly can't wait till we can see you in person again. And you know, we try to look for silver linings in this time of pandemic, and one of them is that we are able to do these virtual events and allow people to tune in from all over the country. And, you know, as much as we would like to be in Minneapolis or in Virginia or in Brazil, we are unable to be in all those places. And so these virtual gatherings, I think this is something that we will keep and will continue to do even when we're able to see people in person again. So thanks for your time. Thanks for being loyal Gorellas. Once again, if you need anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out to my office. We are always here to help. And everybody have a wonderful rest of your fall. And once a Gorella, always a Gorella. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Hey, it's good to see you. All right, I see some pictures now. Excellent. Thanks so much, everyone.